Home sweet nightmare. I'm 25 years old and I'm still in the paying my dues phase of life. I graduated high school with less than average grades and am now going to a technical college while working part-time. My family is well off. Mom's a lawyer and dad is an airplane mechanic. But I wanted to make a name for myself just like they did. So that's why I've been grinding so hard lately. The only thing is, my family's home is on the outskirts of town. To make it into the city, I have to drive almost an hour every single day. My parents could tell this was getting to me, so they had an idea. I had an uncle who was also an airplane mechanic and even taught my dad the tricks of the trade. Unfortunately, he passed away about 6 months ago due to an illness. He had no wife or kids, so when he died, everything was left to his little brother. Among his belongings was a nice home about 5 minutes from town. My dad thought I could cut down on my gas by moving there. I didn't see a problem with this, especially since it was so close to civilization. So with a shrug of my shoulders, I said okay. The story I'm about to tell is what happened while I lived in that house. I remember it was a bright and sunny day, sweltering hot in fact. My dad and I pulled up to the home with most of my belongings in tow. The house was 2 stories tall and painted a hunter's green color. Aside from a few loose tiles and chipping paint, it was a nice place. I remembered staying here a few times when I was a kid. My uncle was pretty boring and had nothing for children to do. In fact, there was only one TV in the entire house. Inside, I noticed that mostly everything was unchanged, albeit some sheets covering the furniture to keep dust off. I noticed a photograph sitting atop the mantel. It was a picture of me, my dad, and my uncle when we went fishing many years ago. My uncle was a quiet man that never had much to say. I often wondered why he never had a family of his own. When I asked, he'd say that he was old and contrary, always following up with a giggle. He used to tell me how important hard work was, how I could get anything I wanted and never have to beg if I sweated for it. While we weren't that close, I could honestly say I'd miss him. After the trip down memory lane, my dad and I started hauling in my belongings. I didn't have much, just a TV, clothes, and game consoles. In the middle of moving, I picked up on something odd. The house seemed to give off a very strange odor. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe a dead rat in the walls, if I had to guess. My uncle had been gone a while, so I figured that was normal. Maybe some air fresheners would make that go away. After a few hours of heavy lifting, I was settled into my new bachelor pad. Well, it wasn't new, but it was going to be my home for the time being. I felt a tinge of excitement. This was really a new start for me. My first shot at a little thing called adulthood. My first night there had me pretty nervous. I hugged my dad goodbye and now it was just me in this old house. It all seemed so big for a guy just moving out of his childhood bedroom. While laying in bed watching a movie, I began to hear some strange noises. Light thuds and creaks echoed just outside my new bedroom. The house itself was pretty old, and my uncle lived here for over 40 years, so I chalked it up to the foundation settling. After my flick, I went to sleep, dreading the day of school and work ahead of me. After a few days passed, things seemed relatively normal, albeit that strange smell that didn't seem to go away. I sprayed air freshener, mopped the floors, but nothing seemed to get rid of that odd scent. Not only that, but sometimes it felt as if someone was watching me, like eyes drilling into the back of my head, but I ended up blaming it on adult life jitters, though there was one night that I still can't explain. I had come home from a tough day at work when I noticed something off. When I left that morning, every light was off and the doors were locked. Upon returning, however, my home was fully illuminated. I quickly killed my engine and looked on in confusion. My parents would have called me if they were coming over, and I had the only key in my pocket. Things got worse as I noticed 3 silhouettes walking around inside. Naturally, my next move was to dial 911 and wait in fear. Who was in my house and why? My uncle never had any problems with burglars. About 5 minutes later, 3 police cars pulled up next to me. Once I explained the situation, they drew their guns and inched towards my house. About 5 cops took up position and kicked my door in. It was safe to say I was scared to death. Was I really about to witness a shootout? It took a while, but eventually the policemen came out wearing some annoyed looks. They explained to me that there was no one in my house. I argued that I had just seen 3 people moving around, but they looked at me like I was crazy, even giving me a pat-down and a sobriety test. Seeing I was clean, the men implored me to go inside and get some rest. Maybe I had left the lights on and was just overreacting a bit. I still ended up calling my parents and sharing my harrowing tale, though at the time, they were away on vacation and acted as if I was interrupting their good time, telling me that if I changed the locks and got cameras, everything would be fine. So I tried my best to forget about it, putting this strange moment behind me. Time passed, and unfortunately odd things kept happening. I would be at home on my days off watching movies and playing games, when suddenly I would hear voices calling out to me from the other rooms. They cried out for help, and it was always the same when I went to investigate. Not a soul in sight. Continue watching for part 2.